Thank you. And it's great to be here today to be able to participate in a symposium that talks about a very important issue. And the sex and sexuality, it's something that God has created for good. And it's a shame that has become so twisted in a sinful world that it has become difficult to talk about. And I guess the question is, why am I here? Danielle called me up with telling me about the Roots leadership and their plans, and asked if I might be able to share some of the experiences of the Pregnancy Care Center, where I serve as an executive director. I've been there for the past 4 years, and probably during that time I've had an opportunity to interact with about 800 different people that have come to see us about issues, a crisis in their life, a time when they were going through a feeling that they might be pregnant, or they were pregnant and they didn't know what to do. 68% of our clients do come for pregnancy tests or for information about abortion and abortion alternatives. The Pregnancy Care Center is a Christian organization, so we exist so that abortion doesn't have to be an alternative for anyone. During the day, I do talk about sex all the time. And so in one sense, I'm familiar with communicating about this issue, except it's usually behind closed doors in small settings. We do have the opportunity to go into the public schools and high schools in the Catholic system as well to talk about sexual integrity, largely to grade 9 students, where we raise the issues about the consequences of being sexually engaged before marriage. And so I've had the opportunity to field a lot of questions. Questions from grade 9ers can be quite intimidating, but as the other speakers have said, this is intimidating for me as well, because I do not come to you in any way to share expertise. I can share with you some experiences. I am not in any way giving you a perspective of a professional Christian counselor in this area, nor have I had the experience of raising teens and young adults as many of you had, and the wisdom that comes with that. So why am I here? It's essentially to share a couple of things. First is to tell you about some of the experiences and what people share with me in private when they're in a safe space, and what they're talking about in terms of their sexual decisions. And also share with you perhaps some of the tools that we use in terms of training that help open up dialogue and help open up discussion about issues and difficult issues such as sex and sexuality. So today I've organized my part of the talk in three sections. Just briefly, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the context where I work at the Pregnancy Care Center, what do we do, and on what basis do we see people. Secondly, I'd like to just talk about how we engage in dialogue, about these issues. And then I would like to also, in the process, challenge the young people that are here. I think that one of the greatest areas of Christian witness for young people today is to live a life that's sexually pure for God's glory. And a lifestyle that's so committed to seeking God's best and waiting to have sex in God's time will not only make fulfillment of that so much more glorious, but it also will speak so loudly to college students, university students, colleagues at work, other people that are rubbing shoulders with you. They're going to ask you for the hope that's within you. They're going to ask you why your life doesn't have the darkness, why your life doesn't have the emotional baggage, why your life isn't like theirs. And I just think it's one of the greatest areas of evangelism and Christian witness that you have an opportunity for as you live your life for God's glory. And I can't stress that enough. And just the encouragement that you can find as you are waiting for God's timing in this area, that you will be developing faith, you will be finding your significance, your sense of belonging, and your true sense of love rooted in Christ, so that whatever the relationships that you do come into at a later point in life, you'll be able to enjoy those so much more. So first of all, I'll tell you about the Pregnancy Care Center. Essentially, we exist to love her through an unexpected pregnancy so that she can love her baby. We have 2 offices, one in North York and Scarborough, and we are involved in caring for her and coming alongside of her. We're a woman's focused ministry. So if you walk into our offices, you won't find any baby pictures because, frankly, she doesn't want to hear about the baby. She feels that her life is over. We've been an abortion alternative ministry since 1984. 1984 was the year when the laws were overturned regarding our abortion laws, and when it became legal, a legal option for women to have an abortion. And as a Christian group of people came together and they said, well, why is it that women are having abortions quite apart from the legalities of it? And at that time, the statistics showed and continue to show that the main reason why women choose abortion as an alternative is because they don't feel like they have any support, that no one is concerned enough to come alongside and help them. They feel condemned, but they don't feel that they have support. So in 1984, a group of individuals came along and said, let's provide practical help. Let people know that there is this support. So opened our doors, offering free pregnancy tests, letting people know about abortion, that the procedures and also the risks involved, helping them through and walking with them through the process of a parenting preparation, and assisting them in making connections so that they could come up with an adoption plan should they choose that one. And increasingly, we offer post-abortion support. Now that we've been operating for over 26 years, we regularly see individuals that have had abortions, initially found that they were relieved by the problem being solved of an unexpected pregnancy, and then subsequent pregnancy triggers things. Seeing babies, that anniversary grief, being in a situation where they can't have children again. We currently have, I had about 20 women that came through our post-abortion support program last year. Many of them in their 20s, 30s, and some of them in their 50s, because this is something that is a secret that continues to give them grief and pain. It's the unresolved guilt and the unresolved grief that continues to haunt people. And when we take a look at long-term consequences, and I see some of these women that are 50 years old in a Bible study and support group, I think about that choice that they made maybe when they were 15 years old and how that's kept them in bondage for so many years, even though most of these women identify themselves as Christians, are active in their local churches. We've seen about 5,700 clients over the time period. We see a little over 200 new clients each year. Some of our distinctives as an organization, we believe that life is from God. That's something it's underspoken, certainly in the city of Toronto. Sex is for marriage, and that is a communication truth that we will go into in the public school systems. But as we've been hearing today, that there's hope in all situations, that God's grace is sufficient for all of our sins. We are all sinners, and we all have need of a Redeemer. The mission to be a caring community, to value the human life, uphold the value of human life, and to offer the love and truth of Jesus Christ by offering practical and emotional and spiritual help to those facing unexpected or crisis pregnancies. Our model of operation is to interact with people at an office level and then try to integrate them with a local church where they will get the support and the care that they need. One of the challenges that we have is that some of our women that have come to embrace their pregnancy are afraid of going back to their own local church because they fear the judgment, they fear the scorn, and so they don't want to go back inside the church again. Those that are outside of the church, if we just give them an indication that you can go to this church or that church, will find themselves walking in and feeling like nobody talks to them and no one knows what to do with them, and they're single with a child, and they don't feel any sense of relationship support, and usually that first visit becomes the last visit. We have, in an effort to try to make this bridge better, we have worked harder by giving seminars and working with our church volunteers so that there's a support team that would be available to help individuals to make that gap and to feel welcomed and to get that long-term childcare support. So as we work, we provide not only support from our offices, which is the main focus and the core of what we do, but we also are trying to empower and encourage the Christian community to offer support and to be a place of refuge for individuals that have made life-affirming choices. And then, of course, go out into the community where we have opportunity to speak truth, because we do have truth and we need to speak it. And we need to realize that truth is life-giving, and we believe that as we speak truth, that this is good for, all truth is God's truth, and it's good for all people everywhere. One of the most difficult days that we have are the phone calls that come on a regular basis. Somebody weeping, somebody struggling, sometimes having to make that phone call 2 or 3 times, saying, I wish I knew there was help. Now it's too late. Why didn't anybody tell me that I would regret this decision? Why didn't somebody support me to have my baby? I felt so alone and confused. I had no one to talk to. We also get the calls from Christian youth workers saying, you know what, there was somebody in my youth group that came and told me she was pregnant, and I just reacted. I got so angry with her. I just said, what? And communication was cut down, and the next time they had that dialogue, there wasn't a baby anymore. On the other hand, we've had Christian youth workers saying, you know, I didn't want to appear judgmental, I didn't want to say anything, and now I've sort of thought through what I should say, and she's already had an abortion. So we would like to talk about the issues, not that we pretend that we have all of the answers, but we recognize at a forum like this, it's just so important to talk and to raise the issues so that we are prepared. And oftentimes the first response matters. The first response matters, particularly of parents to their teens, and certainly friends to friends. One of the projects that we're involved with right now is trying to build what we call the pregnancy network, where we actually go out to different parts of the city, meet with individuals wherever they might be found in their communities at one of our partner churches where we have a first response center. And then at that point, we have church volunteers in that same church that are able to offer that long-term support. And we've got some targeted advertising where we have a verse of scripture on the buses, and we're hoping to expand that in the subway system during the summertime. So our goal is to have as many places, safe places as possible in Toronto where individuals can talk about an unexpected pregnancy. And just as Morgenthaler felt that it was most beneficial to have multiple abortion clinics in Toronto and have people get access to quick services, we also know that the more access that people have to supportive people in their lives, and the longer they carry their pregnancy, the more likely they are to embrace that child and and give life to that child. Okay, what do you need to know about what's going on with teenagers and how that relates to sexuality? Certainly from our experience, we see people that are abortion-minded all the time. The recent statistics show that the abortion rate, certainly in the Toronto area, is 80% among teens. 80%. So that's York region, and then Halton is the second largest region. So right here, 77.9%. 73.8% for Peel, Toronto, and Ottawa. So those are the top of the list. The overall average is just a little bit under the Hamilton number, which is 60.6%. The reality is that not only there's 100,000 abortions at a year a year that take place at Canada-wide, that we've seen about 2 million perfectly healthy babies that have been aborted since 1984, that in our regions where we're living here, that the default mode for young people is to have an abortion. Teens rarely go for an abortion alone. They usually go to an abortion clinic with a parent, a relative, or a boyfriend. Many teens feel that abortion was forced on them because of what their parents said or they perceived that their parents said. Now, the parent may not ever know about the abortion, but they've been so told that sex is for marriage, and the shame element that it would bring upon the family if there was ever an unexpected pregnancy, that oftentimes that is the reason that they will go and have the abortion. The statistics, as I understand, and although it's very hard to get statistics, but certainly from all of the studies in the United States, the statistics within the church and outside of the church in terms of abortion rates are not significantly different. Initially, many of these individuals will find a sense of relief, but later on there will be triggers, and we then have the opportunity to interact with them in the post-abortion program. In our high school classes, when we talk about sex and sexuality, we usually ask if anybody's known somebody that's had an abortion. Put up your hand. Do you know somebody that's had an abortion? Every single grade 9 class, just like this one, we have always found that the hands go up. Grade 9. We don't say anything about what an abortion is, and we just ask and say, well, how would somebody feel that has an abortion? Oh, they'd feel so sad. They get so depressed. They cry all the time. They think that they've killed their baby. They have killed their baby. They break up with their boyfriend. They may not be ever able to have a child again. These are grade 9 students. We haven't said a thing. We've just asked the question, and they already know. As we've heard, the young people that we interact with, they're smart. They get it. They understand. However, when given the opportunity to ask some questions, for instance, one line of questioning: do you plan on marrying the person that you're going out with right now, if they're in grade 9? No, not planning on marrying them. Yeah, well, do you think it's okay to be sexually involved? Yeah, it's probably okay. So, do you want to marry somebody that's had multiple sexual relationships? No, gross. Well, then what makes you think, if you continue your behavior right now, that you are going to be the person that your future mate would want? Oh, hadn't thought about that before. So what do you think would be the benefits of not being sexually active right now? They can tell you. So oftentimes just asking the questions and letting them reflect on it, they're smart. But I think one of the things that we all have learned is we underestimate the power of sin. It reminds me of, a big guy. He was a great big hulk of a guy I think on the football team. And he was limping along, and we were in the school doing presentations, and the teacher said, Steve, I think Steve is his name, what's wrong with you? What happened? Are you okay? Don't worry, ma'am, I'm invincible. And, we all smiled, but of course that was the very thing that most young people feel in the area of sexual exploration and in terms of sexual activities. They do not have an idea of the fact that they are playing with fire. As Proverbs says, we can't scoop up that fire to our breast and not be burned. They do not realize that Satan is a roaring lion seeking to steal and kill and destroy. And they still feel that if there's any problems, that the medical science will take care of that, either in the form of contraception or of an abortion. And so when there is a pregnancy, the response is, I can't be pregnant. And as we've heard before, it's not that they don't understand the mechanics of how pregnancy could have come about, but it's complete denial that, and of course denial is a normal reaction. We think about Adam. He went and hid. And then the logic goes, if I'm pregnant, Then they tell their boyfriend says you have to get an abortion. They said, oh, I can't have a child alone, I'm just too young. Well, we talk about then what logically we would think about. Oh, well, let's think about an adoption plan. Wouldn't that be beautiful, to give your child an opportunity? Oh, I'd be such a bad mother. I'd be just like my boyfriend who left me. And we can all say, well, that's not logical. Well, sin is not logical. But people will sit down and they will justify, and in their minds, they'll being altruistic by going ahead and getting an abortion. Particularly the young people that we know that are Christians. They come in, they've been sexually active, they feel guilty for that. They do not want to cause shame on their pastor, shame on their church, shame on their parents. And they said, it's better, I've already stepped over the bounds, let me take all of the punishment and the wrath of God. I do not want to bring this onto my parents. And so they will have an abortion oftentimes for the sake and for the benefit of their parents, or at least be thinking in terms of that way. And that will be perfectly logical for them. Even if they had been the ones that went down to the march in Ottawa, the pro-life rally. So that is, I guess they feel very much alone. And the reason why they come to us is because there's a safe place where their information and what they share with us is not going to go anywhere. And that seems to be a big factor. Besides abortion being the default decision of teenagers, sexual purity has come to be seen as an unattainable or even not a goal that's not that important. We have met with pastors and parents and teachers and medical professionals in the Toronto area that identify themselves as Christians, but they so believe that since young people are exposed to sexual pressure, that they will succumb to it. They're under so much bombardment, and it's best just to give them birth control. It's best just to make provisions for them. And this is so sad, and being able to go and talk to individuals about, again, the reality that God's word is very clear about these things, and God's plans are for our protection. I think about a young couple that came in, 14 and 15 years old, Christians, going to a Christian school, both attending and active in the same church, both feeling guilty that they'd been sexually active and asking for the pregnancy test. The pregnancy test we did, but before that, I just asked them what their thoughts were. The young man took a very strong biblical perspective and said, no, abortion's wrong. We just need to have this child if there's a pregnancy. And the young woman says, absolutely no way. God may say that, but he must know how I feel. I've got to finish school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. My parents would kill me. The church would be so mad. It's going to mess up my body, everything else. Well, we did the pregnancy test, and the pregnancy test was negative. Everybody's relief. And they were about ready to head out the door, and I said, let's talk. This is a wonderful, we love the negative tests. The negative tests are great moments. Whew, that was pretty bad, wasn't it? You haven't been sleeping for the last week, you haven't been eating, haven't been able to talk. So let's talk about, what do you think you'd do different? Well, the guy sort of looked blank, and the girl said, I am never having sex again until I get married. I am just so guilty, I feel so bad, I've asked God's forgiveness, I am just not going to go there. And the guy says, what? He says, well, just get condoms. And we'd already talked about many different consequences, and she was there. And the guy says, now he'd been the one that was standing up for life beforehand, right? It wasn't his body. It wasn't going to be a lot of his plans that were disturbed. So we started talking to him about just waiting for marriage and the benefits that would be there. So I guess in that particular situation, I'm always reminded of the fact that our beliefs and our understandings of things do not necessarily lead to our actions. And so in this particular case, they were willing to make compromises. And I did find it interesting that, and of course, the point that I guess wanted to make at this point, that unhealthy sexual habits are very enslaving So it's an awful lot easier not to be having sex and waiting than it is to back up. Being sexual beings and the sexuality being so powerful as it is, those that have already crossed the line need to not only know that there's forgiveness, there is grace, but if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us and to purify us from all unrighteousness. However, the whole area of backing up on any sort of addictive, unhealthy activity is going to take much self-control, and it's going to take a very distinct change of behavior. And we have all of those resources within Christ, but we definitely need to recognize that without just applying self-control, without God's help in this area, it's so difficult to back up. So we need to be walking alongside and talking very much about how we as Christians fight against temptation and break sinful habits within our lives. After a sexual presentation given by my colleague Michelle last week, the guidance counselor felt compelled to share that sex was the right of the young people, and if they decided to have sex before marriage, that was their freedom. And after the talk that we gave about sex being, about the consequences of sex before marriage, she then handed out condoms to everybody in the classroom. So that's the type of environment that we're in. We find that majority of doctors, health professionals are going to encourage teenagers to have an abortion if they go to the offices. And in the Spectator article, the concern is largely because economically they will suffer because they wouldn't be able to complete their education. Of course, we know that that doesn't need to be the case. Another point that you need to be thinking about, and again was so well expressed in the previous presentation with Kevin, is that they're always surprised by the consequences. They really don't think that they could have got pregnant. And they really, I think even beyond that, really don't have any conviction that God's boundaries are good for us and that they are going to be hurt when they get out of the limits that God has set. And again, this is not new. It reminds me of Genesis 4. You will surely not die. God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good from evil. And so often they've been told that in the church, your parents, they just want to keep you back from the good things, but you have the freedom. We've been told that there's an international human rights has declared every person the opportunity of sexual exploration. And that gets communicated to children in the public system, but also in all sorts of other communications. So that's the environment that they're hearing. There's this naive belief that they're not going to be getting caught. But rarely do we hear people are able to articulate the emotional bondage that they will have by being engaged in sex before marriage, nor the baggage that they're going to bring into a relationship. The sexual sin affects our very identity of people. And I think particularly from a woman's perspective, because I'm interacting with women, I can just see so often after they've been engaged sexually, their whole sense of self and who they are plummets. They become so distraught that oftentimes they'll rebound to go to another relationship, an unhealthy relationship, because they feel like they've already lost their virginity. What's the point now of stopping? They can get very attached, the belonging issues, and they're so clingy, and they feel that their life will be over. We've had some individuals that have been suicidal. For young men, they tend to feel trapped by sexual habits that have control over them. And they feel, some people we've even heard in terms of in the mission community have had to stop considering work in a Christian context or wanting to work towards that area because they just feel that this is an area that has overcome them. One helpful resource that you might want to share and listen to and use as a resource is R.C. Sproul has got a series called Sex in a Context, and that's available online. And he talks about the emotional issues that are caused in marriages because of unrepentant sin in the area of sexuality. There's quite a number of materials as well on the blog sites. There's a book called Sexual Detox for Guys by Tim Challies, and The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller that has come out recently. So it's just so good to talk with people about the meaning of marriage and taking a look at how they're sabotaging marriage, in fact, if they're moving ahead in areas that are not pleasing to God in terms of their sexual conduct. Very quickly, I think we're stuck here. I'll just very quickly tell you about the client profiles. In general, the first type of person that comes into our place is an independent woman. She feels that she can make her choices independent of her creator. She's made a god out of her plans. She's goal-driven. She's an achiever. She has a right to plan her successful life. And when a baby comes into her life is literally over. She cannot see how her goals and plans will not be achieved. And she is very angry at an unexpected pregnancy. And so, certainly as we see it in the back of her mind, just the lie that she believes is that she's in control of her own destiny and has not in any way thought about the fact that God is. I think about one of our clients, an early childhood education worker. She was in her final year, and she was so looking to be the first person to have graduated from college in her family. Her family was so proud of her, and the unexpected pregnancy. We didn't know her then, but she chose to have an abortion after she had been doing very well at the coursework. Following the abortion, she had to go and do her practicum taking care of babies, if you can imagine. And so she was assigned to this particular child care center, and they asked her to be with the babies and take care of them. And she froze. She couldn't touch them. She couldn't interact with them. She just went numb. Then she sort of started booking off sick all the time, and finally the leader of that particular childcare said, you are not cut out for this work at all. And she ended up failing her practicum with a big OSAP loan on her back. Now the whole dream that she had of being the early childhood education worker, and she comes to us dealing with the past abortion and now dealing with another unexpected pregnancy because there had been no change of behavior where she was at. So in the same way that we can take a look that we're fearfully and wonderfully made in terms of mental development, oftentimes just having the opportunity to share Psalm 139, that not just her baby's fearfully and wonderfully made, which we oftentimes talk about being knit together, but that she is fearfully and wonderfully made, that she has value, she has purpose, and that even though she's in these circumstances, her life is not over and God is Redeemer. And those are some of the things that she has a struggle to believe. She did end up having the second child and working through the post-abortion Bible study program. It's just a joy to see her flourish. Broken woman. The broken woman says basically, it's not my fault. I shouldn't have to bear the consequences. And so this is the young woman to whom she was not wanting to have sex in the relationship. She felt pressured. And now she's pregnant, and she has been sinned against. And so she feels like she shouldn't have to now cope with an unexpected pregnancy. So we need to talk about the fact that she truly, in some cases, has been sinned against, but that doesn't justify her taking the life of her child. And oftentimes the doctors, the social workers, and the people, the professionals in her life will pressure her. I think about one young woman. She had been chronically depressed. She was hospitalized. She's suicidal. She had substance abuse. Her doctors and her family were pressuring her to have the abortion. She decided that she didn't want to, and she came to talk, and she says, can we get support? Well, obviously we need to get some professionals alongside to help her. But baby Jack was born, and baby Jack she saw as a gift from God. And after baby Jack was born, she did not have the postpartum depression that they told her she would have. Baby Jack united the family together because the family just loved this first little grandchild that came into the house. And now family was getting involved to take care of baby Jack so she could go and finish her university education. And she just phoned me up the other day letting me know that she would love to speak at any opportunity we had at a fundraising banquet, because life has just been so changed and transformed since baby Jack came into the picture. The third type of woman that, if I would classified as a client profile is a relativistic woman, and these generally are women of conviction. They're women of faith. They're women that are Christians that say, I believe that abortion is wrong. We had a couple women in last week. She says, I used to be a sexual integrity teacher, and I go around and talk about this. She says, I'm pregnant. I can't have this baby. The reality is we live in a situational environment. We talk about this being new, and in one sense, I suppose that it is, and yet in another sense, we all know that it's something that's from the beginning of time. So I think about a couple who came to us right after they went to the March to Life in Ottawa. They were engaged. They had both finished their education, but they had not got their jobs and the house, which their parents had said were necessary for them to do before they had children. And so they hoped to have children within another 2 or 3 year time period, but because of fears that they would disappoint their family and their church, they felt that abortion would be the only alternative. And the response is, God would really not want us to have this child right now, and I'm sure he'll forgive me. So this is the type of reasoning. In that particular case, they did not go through with abortion. But it certainly is among the young people. And the young people are in a panic mode. And because of an 80% abortion rate in Toronto, and because of young people just responding to the situation and then knowing that everybody goes to the abortion clinic, we don't get to see them because we're not that well known. And they don't have oftentimes places in the church where they can talk, so they go straight to that abortion clinic. I think that, again, we need to speak about God being absolutely serious about truth, absolutely serious about the Word, and sanctify them by truth. Your Word is truth. And again, it's, did God really say? And doing a reality check with the young people, it's encouraging them to live according to their values and realizing that anytime we step out of what we believe to be true and right, we're going to suffer those consequences, and in this case, the guilt of a child. In a situation where they're Christians and where they're considering abortion, obviously we have a greater freedom. We can care enough to confront and say, you know what, you say you believe the Bible, Susie. What do you think about this? You know, do you know that God says this? You have choices, your choices are yours, but you need to know what you're doing has consequences. And the consequences, again, they're only thinking about the short-term ones. The long-term ones are difficult. The final one that I'll just suggest is love at any cost woman. She's the one that's very easily influenced by other people, by her boyfriend, by anybody else. For the teenagers here, so many of them have gone to have an abortion because somebody else pressured them, and she can't disappoint people who are significant in her life. One woman that we was involved in a training last week, she said her sister had an abortion because she was fearing that she would disappoint her parents, and this was 20 years ago. And then later on, these things always come up. She said recently she told her parents that she had this abortion, and that explained a lot of things, a lot of emotional health issues. It explained depression. It explained a drinking problem that had been a part of it. And her parents said, well, didn't you know? Didn't you know that if you got pregnant, we would have welcomed you? We would have embraced that child? Didn't you know that? Well, no. That had never come up in conversations. So if you have parents of teens, if you are in leadership, we are sinful beings, and there will be unexpected pregnancies, not because we're promoting them, but because of the sinful beings that we are. Do people know in your churches that if there was a pregnancy, that you would embrace them and that you would want them to have the baby rather than abort and bring shame on your congregation? When we're talking and taking a look now a little bit about now that you have a little bit of understanding about how young people are thinking in terms of some of their sexual consequences, when you're going to talk to young people, and particularly when they're going through their time of personal crisis, think about your own times of personal crisis and what attitudes do you most appreciate from those that help you. Our initial reaction is usually anger, frustration, disappointment. However, when that gets communicated as we heard this morning in both situations, the communication gets cut down. So what can we do in terms of communication? If we were dealing with a pregnancy center and we were talking about that, we would say be woman-focused. Start with where they're at. For instance, we never start about the baby and what's going on. We start with the woman. What are her hopes and her dreams? How is she feeling? What she's doing? If you're talking to youth, be youth-focused. Find out how they're doing. How are they feeling? What's going on with them? What are they thinking? How are they responding? Think about them from the first perspective. Be empathetic. Understanding, and most young people cannot at all imagine that their parents were at the stage that they were. They can't. They just can't imagine that because they see their parents as setting the rules and being the judges in their lives. So being empathetic. Humility, and again, that's just pointed out so nicely this morning too. We are all sinners saved by grace. Do your children, as elders, have you ever suggested, not with outlining specific sins, did they know that you are a sinner that fights against sin, that's something that still continues to be a battle? Do they understand that you are also going through struggles, and that maybe, and is there that position of recognizing that none of us are in a position of being judgmental because none of us are free from sin? Are you expectant of God to be at work in the young people's lives that you're interacting with? In our office, it's just beautiful. You know, when people come in, why did they come in a city of 2 million with a small little organization talking about an unexpected pregnancy to people that are strangers? God's brought them there. We're expectant that God is working at them. Are you looking at that? When you're interacting with the young people in your church and you're concerned about them and you're praying for them and they're praying for their sexual purity, are you expecting that God is going to give you some of those moments that we've heard about through both of our speakers this morning on the bus, in the hallway? Is there an acceptance there? Is there a sense of love? Is there a sense of relationship where they could feel that you could be a safe person to talk to? And are you real and genuine? No platitudes, no false stuff, just they want it straight. They want to know it straight. They don't want philosophy. They just want it to be real. They want you to be real. So as our volunteer training, we because we're women focused and we're dealing with the pregnancy center, we use this acronym WE here. I couldn't be, my alliteration and my synonyms, I couldn't come up with a youth-focused W, so maybe you can have a YE here. But that can be just something, just before you go to talk, interact with somebody that you find difficult to interact with. You know, if we're talking about youth in this situation, you want to talk about something, have this in mind. Just do a mental check. Am I focused on them? Am I empathetic? What about humility here? Am I expecting that God's working? Is there acceptance for them? And can I be real and genuine? The other approach, another tool, the second tool I'd like to share with you is what we call the love approach. For instance, if she's coming into, or they're as a couple are coming into our center, I would listen and learn everything I can about her. Ask her all sorts of questions, her needs, her strengths, her awareness, her feelings, her thoughts, her wants, her values, her beliefs, her perspective on things. I'm going to use sort of all of the questions except the why questions. I'm not going to, if we've got a crisis on the hands here, we've got an unexpected pregnancy, this is not the moment to be asking the why question. It's just the same as if we had a car accident here in front of Ebenezer Church and we would go out and we would, and somebody's been drinking and driving. This is not the moment to give the lecture on why you shouldn't be drinking and driving. It's the time to phone 911. If somebody has come to you for help in any area, this is the time where they need to know that you're listening, you're accepting them. You will have those opportunities later on, but this is not the moment to do the lecture and ask why. So pay very close attention to body language, ask open-ended questions, interpret, check out, do I really understand you? Are you feeling this way? Observe and listen to contradictions. You know, I hear you say this, but this is happening. How are you working through these things? So spend most of your time in this learning and listening mode, but then you want to open up some options. If there's some difficulties and you don't have the answers, you don't need to have all the answers, but you know somebody else that does. You can connect them. You're going to walk with them and help them find that they're not in a box. They're not in a place where they have no other solutions. There are some options, being factual, loving, and caring. In the case of the Pregnancy Care Center ministry, if someone's dealing with an unexpected pregnancies, we can talk to them about all the levels of parenting support and all the opportunities there are for adoption. In youth ministry or working with youth in the church, of course, you can open up options for talking to other people about some questions that are hard to answer, or to bringing other people in. Probably most important aspect of what we do is, and what you can do is interacting with people, is talking about vision and value, awakening vision and value for a healthier life, asking them about what they believe is right, asking them what Jesus would do in a situation like that, asking them what is important to them in life, and just having them articulate their vision and their hopes and their dreams and their values and their standards that they live for. As Christian adults and young people, oftentimes they know that, and they're not necessarily seeing the disconnect between the behavior that they're planning to engage in and their very values. And so helping them see that and asking them whether or not they've ever, if they go against their values in the past, how that's affected them. You know, if you've lied, Susie, before, and at the end of the day you put your head in the pillow, what happens? Well, I feel guilty. Well, how do you think you would feel, Susie? You say abortion's wrong, you've been involved in the pro-life movement. How do you think you'd feel after you'd have an abortion? Oh, well, yeah, I think I'd feel bad for a little bit. Oh, do you think it would just be for a short little while? Well, then helping people think through the consequences and thinking through what their true values and vision are. And then E, extend and enable, helping them to see that they have options and they have opportunities to grow in the areas and get the help that they need, and that the door is opened. So ask lots of questions, open up some options, value, encourage them to a healthy future through their values, and empower and engage. So just finally to wrap up here, my part is for church leaders. Most of the young people that we talk to have never heard sermons or messages or had anything prepared in church for them about God's purposes for sex and sexuality. Most of the young people we hear feel that their elders would be judgmental if they shared with them their questions that they have. If we are a church and a body that's pro-life, as we should be, are we also a community that's pro-grace? Have we created that environment where a repentant sinner can be treated well within an atmosphere of love and acceptance? Or would somebody that is repentant of their sin and comes in as an unexpected pregnancy, would they be considered as a second-rate member in the church? Parents, have you discussed this issue in your particular home? I have brought some discussion guides. We've prepared these Let's Talk About Life discussion points for parents and teens. Again, just a few scripture references and a few questions that you can have to talk about both the sanctity of life, the purpose of marriage, and the realities of fighting against temptation. So if that can be helpful to you, I'll have them here, and you're more than welcome to those. Talk to children about sexual purity from a very early age, so it's not an uncomfortable thing. There's a very helpful author by the name of Jenny Bishop who has The Princess and the Kiss and The Scribe and the Scroll. Some of you know those ones. See that? I mean, it starts the dialogue and just puts such great principles from a very early age. But setting the example by having a healthy and loving marriage. Eric and Leslie Luddy have written a number of books on family and relationships, and one of them is called Teaching True Love to Sex at a age 13 generation. So the book's premise is that young people have witnessed poor marital relationships and they don't envision a good marriage worth waiting for. They see pain and brokenness and have not captured a true vision for God's purposes in marriage. So their book talks about setting the bar high and also pointing youth to find their true delight in God. Talk about issues in your family. If there was an unexpected pregnancy, do your children know that although you'd be disappointed And although this would be a sin against God, which is very serious, sin against, and would have consequences, that you would want your child to tell you and you would want to support your child? Do they know that? You may think they do, but so often the young people that we see have aborted because of the perception of what their parents would respond to. Are you setting expectations for your children that they feel are impossible to attain, whether that be wealth or educational goals or relationship goals that they just feel that they can't wait? So many young people have said, well, they want me to graduate from university and go to post-secondary school and get money and have a job and have this. And they say, I can't do that. And so what they do is start compromising and saying, you know what, I'm not going to just sleep with anybody. I've been in a long-term relationship. We've been going together for 8 months now, or we've been going together for a year now. And so, we've waited long enough. So talk with young people about, first of all, the consequences and the truth of God's word, but also talk to them about your expectations as well. Young people, sex is a spiritual battleground and not a playground. It's a precious gift, and temptation is so very obvious at this stage in your life. You are bombarded with it. So don't think you can play with fire and not get burned. Be careful not to open it up before God's intended time. The benefits are so glorious. And it's more than a physical act. It's mental. It's spiritual communication. It's a precious gift, and you're going to sabotage that. However, if you have gone over the boundaries, don't continue to follow that same pattern. Stop. Acknowledge your sin, confess, get back, and fight against it. That is something you cannot let have dominion over you. It will kill you. God wants to bless you and not spoil your life. And I love Proverbs 8:35, whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor with the Lord, but he who fails to find me will injure himself. Do you really believe that when we step out of what God's purposes are, we are the ones that get injured? God, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, Ecclesiastes says, but also remember that God is your Creator. You live in an age where everybody tells you that there isn't one. Well, there is, and he has made you fearfully and wonderfully. And as you let your Creator, your conscience, and Christ fill your life, you will find the meaning and you will find your plans set. So, make your plans in submission to him and wait for him to let Christ be your sense of love, your source of love, your belonging and significance. And remember the Christian witness opportunity you have. You want to find a place in the church. You want to have new opportunities and a unique opportunity that the adults don't have. You live a sexually pure life. You are going to call attention to yourself, and you are going to call attention to the hope that's in you. Foster your faith life. Let that be a beacon in your community. You bring people into the church because of the unique mission opportunity that you do have in life. And again, we thank God for all of his good gifts, including sexuality. But let's all pray that lives will be lived within the boundaries, and that our young people and older people would bring glory to God in this area. So thank you.